Good morning, everyone. Good extra early morning, everyone. Cheers to any of you out there who are just kind of wandering around, or maybe you haven't reset your clocks yet, or you're just remembering about daylight saving. Thank you for joining us this morning for this week's Come Follow Me lesson with the Mormon News Report podcast. My name is Jenny Noonan Dye. I am joining you from Provo, Utah, along with my husband.
Good morning, everyone.
He is the one who is responsible for all you see on your screen, for those of you partaking live of the video. As always, for any of you who are participating in real time here on our video stream, we'd love to hear from you, where you are, what stood out to you in your study this week, whether it's the first or 50th time you've read these verses, or even if you didn't read them at all. We get to as many comments as we can, just as we would if we were gathered together in person. As always, I'm excusing my co-host for the Mormon News Report podcast, Brent Malone in Detroit. He is dutifully tending to some very important family responsibilities. And so we welcome, as always, our good friend, our go-to for all the nitty-gritty when it comes to our Come Follow Me study, the daylight to our saving, the 3.14 to the 159265359, etc., all the way from California. It's Ben Bernards. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Jenny and John. Good morning to everybody that's out there on the podcast or joining us in the class today. We're so glad to have you here. It's another episode of the Mormon News Report, Hour of Power, here bringing you the AP Church history. We want to challenge the scriptures and our stories behind them and hopefully be challenged by them. And yeah, today we want to maybe bring you out of the darkness of a boring traditional Sunday school and into an extra hour of sunshine in your soul. That is the Mormon News Report podcast. And I don't know about you, but I like this whole fixing clocks thing. I had mine fixed like 6 months ago. Well, they've been out of sync for 6 months, but now they're totally right on. So it's great.
What a lucky day for you. Your clocks are finally back in sync again.
Finally, I know what time it is. It's amazing. How is everybody out there adjusting? I know we've got hope on the horizon. We've got vaccines on the way. Our boys might be going back to school soon. And I actually heard this might be the last time we change clocks for daylight savings time. There's some laws. People are talking about stuff that it might become a permanent thing.
Really?
I think that could be a good one.
I hear that a lot. Is that just kind of like an ongoing, almost urban legend at this point?
It's going to happen. It's going to happen. We're getting closer. One of these days we'll get there.
Well, maybe that's true. Today I want to take a minute before we get into the lesson. Today, as we record this lesson, it is Sunday, March 14th, 2021. And this is a very significant time because I came across a post on Facebook from exactly a year ago today, March 14th, 2020, regarding what would happen the next day. And so John has brought it up here on the screen. You can see just a screenshot of this post that was put up a year ago today on the Mormon News Report Facebook page. Brant was the one who posted it, and he wrote a year ago, "Self-isolation can be hard, especially for a communal church like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We at the Mormon News Report want to help provide a bridge for us to gather together in one, all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and which are on earth, even in him. Come join us on Sunday, March 15th at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, 12 Eastern for a Come Follow Me discussion held by Jenny with audience members John and Brant. We'd love for you to offer your thoughts, comments, and questions on our live stream to help us replicate that feeling of a traditional Sunday school lesson. It's times of great trial like this that can remind us just how human we all are." And I've talked about it a couple times in the past couple of weeks leading up to this day, and I've gotten emotional about it that it has been a year. I mean, at that point we thought, okay, well, church has been put on hold, and so we're going to do this virtual Sunday school class to hopefully provide a space for any of those who are not attending in person, who need to have some sort of connection with one another. And here we are a year later. I hope that that the format and what we've done has evolved. We've done a lesson every single Sunday except for the 2 conference Sundays. We did it on Easter, we did it on Mother's Day and Father's Day, and I mean, I'm very grateful. I guess I just want to say a heartfelt thank you to all of you who have joined us at any time throughout the last year on this Come Follow Me discussion, whether you've participated live on the Facebook video stream and you've left comments or thoughts, or you've even participated on the live video stream and you've been silent. Thank you for being there. For those who have taken the time to listen to the audio that we put on the Mormon News Report podcast feed, thank you for doing that. Those of you who have felt inclined to share with your friends or family or anyone else you think might benefit from this, thank you. And most especially, thank you to Brant, thank you to Ben, and thank you to John, all of you for going on this journey. I'm blessed to be with you. So 1 year later, thank you. I wanted to make sure that I said that.
Amen to all of that. I mean, this is one of those milestones that nobody ever wanted to reach. You know, that this is a hallmark that we never could have imagined. And I mean, looking back on it, it's amazing how fast, in some ways, it's like the entire thing, like you blink and you're like, oh, wow, it's already the new year. And then, oh, wow, it's already March. And then, oh, wow, it's already the 1 year. And while you're in the middle of it, a single day can feel like it lasts forever. Mm-hmm. I am really hoping that is the last 1 year anniversary of this that we ever deal with.
Yeah.
Congrats on making it to 1. Let's hope we don't make it to 2.
Yep. No kidding. And here's our good
luck of the Irish.
Luck of the Irish. John's so happy about that, overlay. And so, yeah, so we can get into it. Thank you to everyone who has chimed in. Again, letting us know. Tony says we know he's in the UK and he's by himself today. Today, like I mentioned, is March 14th, 2021. And our lesson today is called Strengthen the Church, which covers Doctrine and Covenants sections 23 through 26. And, you know, Ben, we mentioned last week that there's a lot here. And I am so excited to hear what you have to say, you know, what you want us to talk about in this kind of, as you mentioned, AP church history. Hopefully, please bless for today. Hour of Power. You know, you always bring such great perspective. And we kind of do, like you mentioned, like a deep dive. That's something that this isn't maybe your typical Come Follow Me format or even material that we're covering. However, it's something that we hope to be able to provide so that your study or even the discussion is amplified as we look at these sections in church history.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way of discussing it, that we want to, you know, we're not going to do much of a service if all we do is just reread the exact same manual, because y'all can do that out there. Everybody's got the gospel library and everybody can listen to it. And that's awesome. So we're going to hopefully add a little bit to it. And if it's beneficial for you, then you know what, we've done our job. So to start off today, I would like to frame the discussion by asking the question, for Jenny and John specifically, since you're here, you can hear my voice, but for anybody else that's out in the crowd, we'd like you to think of this as well. So my question for today, I'd like you to think of a person who was influential in your life. Not necessarily like a leader, but a person who influenced you. Can you think of somebody like that? And can you give us an example of what they did? Like, what did they do that was so influential for you?
Oh, wow.
Any ideas?
Influential in what way, Ben?
In whichever way you choose. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be maybe they steered you in a course that you thought was different. Somebody that altered your trajectory for good or ill. Somebody that influenced you, that you feel comfortable sharing. Sure.
Do you have one, John?
Yeah, I've got one really quickly. I've seen the slide, so I'm going to say Stephen R. Covey. But I'm kind of joking because I've seen the slides and I know where you're going with this. But no, at Rick's College in 1989? I think. Kids, ask your parents. I had an English instructor who saw a kernel of hope in me, and he mentioned, you're a good writer. You ought to consider this. And so anyway, I went on to get my master's in English, and I mean, just having that, having somebody, tell you that, see that you have hope and see that you're good at something, I think influenced me.
Very cool. Awesome. Jenny, do you have somebody that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I have an idea also similar to what John shared. Also an instructor, a friend who some people here may know, and for those who don't, I'll just share that I am a fitness instructor, specifically with dance fitness, specifically Zumba, and gosh, about this June, I believe it will be 7. Nope. Yep. 7 years. I think 6 years or 7 years that my local Zumba instructor, who happens to also be an employee of Zumba corporate, and she trains people all around the world. She said, it was a really kind of time in my life of upheaval. A lot of changes were happening, and she kind of took me under her wing. In local classes, she would have me come up on the stage and teach a class. I didn't realize until later that I'm the only person she's ever had do that who wasn't already a licensed instructor. And
wow.
So she said, "Hey, I'm doing a training in Texas. Will you be my guest?" And so I went down to Texas one weekend with her and did 2 trainings, became a licensed instructor, and spent that time with her. And it was really encouraging. I mean, like John mentioned in his case, it was that encouragement that she provided. She showed me that she believed in me, kind of showed me that she saw what I could do in a way, and believed in it in a way that I couldn't at the time. And it really did change the trajectory of my life in a lot of ways. And I'm forever grateful for that. Her name is Cass.
Oh, very cool. Thank you for sharing. So for everybody that's out there, I hope that you've had, or you can think of somebody that has had a similar impact in your life. Somebody where for however short of a time you crossed paths and your lives intersected. And because of that, you became different. I'm inspired by the language of the musical Wicked, where it doesn't always have a happy ending for both people. But sometimes those people, they come across our lives and they change, not necessarily for better, but our lives are changed for good. And the reason that I think about this is when I was reading over Doctrine and Covenants, section 23, I couldn't help but feel that some of the people that were mentioned there had such a small impact and a small little piece to play in terms of the scripture count. They get like a verse, right? And the stuff that they get said to them in the section on the surface feels like a copy paste of what was said to other people. So when I was reading this, I was like, how do I find myself in this verse? If I was reading this and I want to say, let's build up the church, let's see what God said to this particular person. And I go read that one verse and it basically says, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job. I could feel like, man, that's not a lot to go on. If I was expecting something big, like a big calling, like some big level of authority. And the idea behind all of this is that in God's eyes, maybe the things that really matter most don't necessarily happen from those big callings, from those big piles of authority that we can receive. That maybe you can have an influence in somebody's life for good, that you can be that influencer, TM, without having a big calling. Now, that's going to be incredibly difficult for some, especially if you don't have the visibility or the training or anything that goes with it. But maybe that's the kind of lasting change that God wants us to have. So a little bit of history about what's happening at this time in section 23, all right? So we want to see kind of what's going on in the timeline out there. So again, this is in July 1830. So this is still just, the church is a couple months old, right? It's only been out there for just a little while. Joseph Smith, again, he's in his early 20s. So think about any young single adults that you know, some YSA college-age kids, and a handful of them started book club together, and they're getting together at Farmer Bob's house. That's literally what's going on over here, all right? So we've got people that are called elders of the church, but that's not like the elders quorum. It was elders as in the sense of the old guys that were in charge. But these aren't still the old guys, where there's no first presidency. The apostles haven't been called. There's no auxiliaries that have been set up. There's no young men. There's no young women. There's no primary. There's not even a relief society. They don't have a budget. They don't have a handbook of instructions. They don't have anything else besides just them and a couple people that feel like they could stand up and talk about whatever was in their heart when it comes to the scriptures. So really, this is like, I mean, it's like a bunco group with a little bit of extra spirituality shaken on top. Now, can we see influence still happening from these people? Absolutely. And because maybe there's a difference between the authority structure that we see in the church versus the amount of influence that we can have as a person. So if you're listening to this audio-wise, imagine that we were to draw a graph. On the vertical axis, on the y-axis, is relative levels of authority. And I will let you, the reader or the listener, fill in authority in whatever context you want. Okay, it could be legal authority, it could be formal authority, some type of official authority. That's the vertical axis, all right? And across the x-axis, or across the side, is the amount of influence that a person has. And again, to you, influence can be defined however way that you want it. Now, I want you to think about people in your life that have had different levels of authority and different levels of influence. Can you think of anybody like that? Maybe you've seen people that have had like a high level of authority, but they didn't necessarily influence you. Or maybe somebody that had a huge amount of influence, but they weren't really in a position of authority. So I took just kind of a wild stab and just scattered a handful of people across this sort of a grid. And I could see that there were people like judges and policemen, or like a school principal, somebody that I knew was the main head honcho, the main guy in charge, or the main woman in charge. They had a ton of authority and had zero influence on my life, right? But I just knew that they were out there. And then down on the other end of the axis, I think of people that have been like my best friends, somebody that was really close to me, or even my spouse, somebody that had a ton of influence in my life, but they had no legal authority, right? I mean, I haven't exactly, I know I'm getting older. I got to figure out what power of attorney and all that kind of stuff is. So we'll get to the legal authority out there, and maybe somewhere in the middle of this is my boss. It's actually kind of an unusual scenario for me. I work for a computer company. I'm in the IT field. And for us, it's pretty common for people in my industry to jump ship, to move from company to company, and for my generation to move company every 3 to 5 years. Like the whole idea of company loyalty, gone out the window. For most of us, that's not the case. I've been with my company now 13 and a half years. And in the IT realm, especially with new technological devices coming out, that's a long time. A lot of tech comes out in 13 years. And I've had one boss the entire time. She has been my boss the whole time I've been with this company. She has been with our company, our computer company, for 35 years. So she's seen everything. She's been there. She's seen the things that we've created, the rise and the fall. She has a surprising amount of influence on my life, the directions that we have, and she's got the authority. So at the very bottom of this quadrant, the people have no authority and low influence on my life are the people that I would call the influencers. And it's incredibly ironic that we see folks like this, right? The whole blue checkmark crowd, the social media influencers. And then on the other opposite end is somebody that I would think that, well, gosh, for mortals, it's only going to be the pathological narcissists that want to have absolute authority, but also absolute influence on the lives around us. So with that, before we go any further, does that make sense? Do you, Jenny and John and the folks in the crowd, do you kind of see how this quadrant and this graph lays out? And most importantly, can you see other people in your lives in the various places that they would land in?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I just to give voice to, if anyone is listening to this or watching this and they are having the same thought, that when you talk about influence, also how that can be something that is negative, meaning you might have had, oh, I don't know, let's say hypothetically, a principal in high school that was just a real jerk. They had authority and influence, and the influences, man, I don't want to be like that. You'd like to think that they didn't have a lot of influence, but in fact they did. And but just in a different way, right? I think that's one thing that's interesting about the term influencers when it does come to social media, because that's an arena where I've worked, where John especially has worked for a long time, and some people have, I mean, there are different levels of it, but I think the point is that there can be influence either way. So I just wanted to give voice to that in case someone out there is going, wait a minute, but that's, but I like that. I think there's a lot to consider, and even over time that, when you're younger, you may not think that someone like, say, a local legislator would have a lot of influence in your life. And then as you get older, you realize they actually do have a lot of influence. It's just not something that you can see directly or think about a lot. So I really like this grid idea. And anyone who's listening to the audio, I'd encourage you to, if you're having a hard time visualizing, I think it's great that you're giving this description, Ben. Maybe hop over to our Facebook page for the Mormon News Report and check out the visual on the slide that Ben has created.
And I think you bring up a really great point, is that influence is for better or for worse, right? that influence simply means that there's a power coming into us that has shifted our lives, not always in good ways. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I have those people that have come into me and they have brought influence in ways that I've had to change on my own. But this also brings up an interesting question, and I think we need to, I'd like to ask a couple of questions. I'd like to compare and contrast the differences between authority and influence. So Jenny, question for you. What would you see as the similarity between how is authority granted versus how is influence granted? And how long do they last? And how broad is the range? If you were to try to explain to teenagers, what's the difference between having authority versus having influence? What do you see?
So as far as how is it granted, it kind of depends on the structure in which you're talking about, right? Because like you mentioned, it could be something that is legal, that is official, that can rely on things like certifications or achievement. And at the same time, it also could be something where, influence is something that more is, yes, it does depend on the structure that you're in, but it also can be what you choose to allow in your life. I'm trying to think.
Almost like authority is something that is given by like an external organization, and the influence is something that I'm only going to give that person influential power if I choose to. It's something that comes internally from me.
Yes, exactly. Like this person has authority, but again, and it does depend on the structure, because this is in a lot of cases a matter of privilege and choice, which many people find themselves not in that situation. But it can be, I am choosing to not let this influence or, affect me, whether for good or bad, I'll say too, because you mentioned, explain this as if it's a teenager. Let's talk about maybe a university professor, right? They have the authority. How the authority was granted, well, that's before our time. All we know is that they have the authority because they're in the classroom at the head of the classroom. The influence depends on our own engagement in what they're offering, for good or for bad. I don't want to just say, that we can choose to not, but I mean, I see it a lot, frankly, if I may, with teenagers, where I see even their high school teachers saying, I'm happy to make this accommodation. I'm happy to help you with this. And the teenager perhaps just isn't interested, chooses, to not have the influence, be a part of that.
Good call. So talk about timeline. How long does authority last versus influence?
Again, I guess it depends on, all of these are situational, right? If there are things that are professional or legal, sometimes there are time limits, or you need something like a recertification as far as the authority, so that you remain an authority, right? Because like you talked about, Ben, you've been in tech, you've worked at your job, did you say 13 years?
Yeah.
And just, gosh, the world of difference in tech that has come out in that time. There's some work that needs to be done, some action that needs to be taken for that authority to remain in the face of what is changing. How long does the influence last? Again, it can depend on the initial impact. I want to go, actually, in that vein, I want to go to a comment that was shared here by Maria. She said, a former boss, I would always complain to him about customers. I was a cashier. One day before I started, blah, 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 he stopped me and he said, don't tell me the problem, Maria. What I want to hear is the solution. And it still helps me. It's almost 30 years ago. And I think that is a wonderful example about authority, about influence, because that's a situation where she went to the source of authority, and being someone who has been on the receiving end of that comment, but also being on the end of something where being on the end of giving that kind of comment, that can go a lot of different ways. And I really want to applaud Maria for saying that it still helps her almost 30 years later. So how long does it last? Also a choice. Mm-hmm. One thing that might help is, if you have especially a good experience, is to write it down. We've talked extensively about the importance of journaling, and one wonderful, I guess, fruit of the efforts of journaling is going back and revisiting. And you may think, oh my goodness, I heard this in a talk once, and it really, I was younger and it affected me at the time, and I've forgotten it. So I'm glad that I wrote it down. Yeah. So that's kind of those are some of my thoughts about how long do authority or influence last.
That sounds great. Now let's take all those thoughts and let's push them towards a church setting.
Sure.
Okay? So the next round of questions, very similar in this same idea. What type of authority or influence do you think we need in the church? So what does God expect us to have? And how are we supposed to use this authority towards authority or influence towards others?
Got it. So in a church setting, in the structure in which we live right now, and the gospel which is being restored, we know that one source of authority comes from directly, obviously, from God, from what has been revealed. Another source of authority is that of stewardship, whether in the formal structure of callings within a ward, within a stake, within a branch, or even within a family. So what was the other part of the question?
Can we go to the next slide? We've got some other questions lined up.
Let's see.
When we say, there we go. So which do you think is needed in the church more, authority or influence? And how do we use them? And then the last one we'll touch on here in a little bit, how do we expand our influence? And for people that are out there in the crowd, we'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Which do you feel is needed in the church, authority and influence? But most importantly, how do we actually use it?
Those are good questions. I think both are needed. Obviously, I'm leaning more toward influence for good in the church. When I think of things along the lines, so are you talking specifically just within the church or as members of this church?
Yeah. Both,
Okay.
whatever you think you'd like to address.
Okay, because the reason I ask that question is because when it comes to authority versus influence, people who are not of our faith don't really pay heed to what authority we say there might be.
Sure.
Do you know what I'm saying? We could say, oh, well, so-and-so is my bishop. And it's like, what do you mean he's your bishop? He works at Sam's Club. I mean, that's how I know him.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's more to your second question, how do we use it? And even your third, how do we expand our influence? We don't need to have been given authority to have influence.
Bang, that one right there. Did you hear that, everybody? Can you repeat that, Jenny? Say that again. Now, if anybody can still hear me, looks like we've had a little bit of technical difficulty on John and Jenny's side. They're going to be reloading here. We're going to be back in just a minute. So if you're out there and if people are still listening, Tony, it sounds like you're still there. And if anybody else out there is still in the crowd, I'm going to go ahead and answer this question, at least from my perspective, of the difference between the authority and the influence. One of the examples that we had in my life, when I saw a person that was actually really, really influential, came from a very unexpected source. The first one that came to my mind was a gentleman. His name is Tim Lotzenheiser. And he was a leadership for teens guru that would come and share examples with other high school kids that were doing marching band stuff. Of all the things you could possibly imagine, it was marching band for teenagers. And he was kind of like a Stephen Covey version of that sort of a person. And because of that, his idea was, we want to give ideas that would empower these kids, because band is not about just making the music. Band is about becoming a better version of yourself and learning how to improve that skill. And because you've used that skill to become a better person, once you know how to lead yourself, then you can lead others. So that is one of the examples that I saw. John and Jenny, sounds like we've got you guys back. Everybody doing okay?
Yeah, sorry about that. All of a sudden, our light flashed, everything. It was just a quick.
It's a brownout.
Yep.
Oh, a little brown. Okay, so glad that you guys are back. Okay, so right before we cut off, you had said something that was like the gem of the episode. Do you remember what it was? You're talking about influence versus authority in the church.
Yeah, we don't need to have authority to have influence.
Why is that? How come that we can have great influence in people in our lives without being in a position of authority?
Because everyone has influence over everyone, no matter what.
Awesome. There's this idea that was really helpful for me to understand when I felt like things that I did didn't really matter. And there was a different diagram. You're probably getting by now, I'm kind of a visual person. And if something doesn't make sense to me, I will try to draw it out in a picture until it will make sense. And this is something that really helped me find my place in the world. I would like you to imagine 3 concentric circles, like orbits in a solar system, or 3 circles all within each other, all right? And this represents our experience in the world. The outermost circle is the boundary of awareness. Everything inside that boundary are things that I know about. That's things that I'm aware of in the world. And everything on the outside of that boundary is everything else. So, for me, when I was a kid, that boundary of awareness was really small. It was my tiny little Utah Mormon bubble, right? I just sat inside my little bubble of happiness, and that's all that I knew about. And now that awareness has gotten a little bit bigger. Now, the next layer the next circle inside that awareness are things that I'm actually concerned about, right? Because not everything that I know is something that I'm actually going to be really upset or concerned about, things that really make a difference to me. There's only going to be a certain section that is actually going to be a level of my concern. So I've gone from awareness to concern. And the other thing that we have to remember is that there's only so much that I can do. I only have so much control. There's only certain things that I can actually direct one way or the other. So the final circle on the very inside is my circle of influence. Okay, not a circle of authority, not a position of absolute command. So we've gone awareness to concern to influence, all the way down on the inside. Now, I am sitting here right in the very middle of that little circle of influence. And so I can change those boundaries as I would like, and I can shift them any way that I need to, and I can move around within them, but that's always going to be the order in which we proceed. Now, before I go any further with that, Jenny, does that make sense to you? Do you have any thoughts on that model?
I think that is a really good visual. I do wonder where things like influence, and maybe you can answer this. For instance, if I cut somebody off in traffic, I've influenced them, but I'm not aware of it.
Ooh, good question. So maybe there's going to be a little bit of overlap on this Venn diagram where my influence circle actually extends out past my level of awareness.
Yeah. I don't know. That's very thought, but I like that a lot.
That's actually a really good point. And I'm going to make a note of that for another discussion, because I think there's something to be said there about the unintended consequences and the ways that we influence people without realizing it. And in many ways, that's kind of part of what we're here for, right? Mm-hmm. So if we have this kind of key, John, if you want to go ahead and pull up the next one, please. I think we will find ourselves moving at different places inside these circles. We will find ourselves at different areas. And one of the key points of today's discussion that I'm hoping, or the key takeaways I'm hoping you'll realize, is that where we find ourselves within these circles can make all the difference in the world as to what we do in the church and how we serve our brothers and sisters. If I find myself somewhere completely outside my zone of awareness, that's a state of ignorance. And that's an okay place to be. There are things out there that ignorant, from the original French that I learned on my mission, it literally means to not know. To be ignorant of something, it just means that, there's things that I just don't know about. Inside that, the next stage they're in that space between concern and awareness, that's where I am indifferent. Things that I know about, but I don't care about. Now, the next space that gap between my influence and my concern, that is where I find anxiety. And that is something that can have a huge amount of control over my life, sometimes without my control over it. And if I can move into this space where I focus my energy on the absolute core of that influence, that's where I find empowerment. That's where I say, this is what I can do. I don't need to worry about the other pieces. I don't need to try to fix everything that's out there. But what I do have in front of me is what I can control. And if that is nothing more than me and my kids today, then so help me, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So question for you and for the crowd, how does this help us be better Latter-day Saints, but more than that, be better Christians, be better humans, and be better fellow citizens on this planet Earth?
This model?
Yeah.
I think the more awareness we have and the more we try to expand our influence and concern, the better off we are, because it ceases to be so, I guess, egocentric.
Because it's not all about me, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. I think one of these key skills about building the kingdom and strengthening our fellow saints is understanding that line between what we can do and what we can't do.
Mm-hmm.
We don't always have to be in a position of authority to influence others for good, to bear one another's burdens, to mourn with those who mourn, to comfort those who stand in need of comfort. We don't have to be a teacher to be a teacher. Mm-hmm. We don't have to be the bishop in order to be a shepherd. We don't have to be the president in order to receive the powers of heaven. Maybe this whole idea of being anxiously engaged in a good cause that we hear all the time, doing things of our own free will and trying to bring about Zion, maybe that means that we come to understand the line between what we can do and what we can't, and then focusing our time and energies on those things that we can control. Because we don't have to do everything. We don't have to fix all the problems in the world. All we have to do is try our best wherever we're at, and God can magnify it into something greater. I think this relates to the discussion of priesthood authority versus priesthood power. Authority is something that comes from callings, but power is something that comes from covenants. So in that sense, women have priesthood power, not because of the men in their lives, not because of the callings that are around them, but they can tap into that priesthood power through the promises and the covenants they make. That, if you think of like LinkedIn, the website where you see how well connected you are to people around you, you can have like a first or second or third degree connection. Like, I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. Well, for us, the cool part about being children of God on this planet, our spiritual LinkedIn connections to God is exactly one step away. And that's the same for both men and women. We don't access God through our husbands or through our bishops or even through the prophet. For the single mothers that are out there, you don't have access to the powers of heaven through a son who happens to have the priesthood or through the priesthood holder in your home. You access him, and all of us access him on our own via our own hearts and our own lives, through the promises that we make and the way that we try to live up to those promises on a daily basis. And so if we understand that level of influence, and if we understand that that's what we have, then we can realize that our ability to help build the kingdom, to help build the bricks in the wall of this gigantic thing that we're trying to construct to God, can happen regardless of what calling we may or may not have. And that is the spirit that I see in D&C 23. When I see a single verse that says, for example, to Samuel, I'll take a look at D&C 23:4. He says, I speak a few words unto you, Samuel, for thou art under no condemnation. Thy calling is to exhortation and to strengthen the church. Thou art not yet as called to preach before the world. Amen. And that's all it is. Mm-hmm. When I first look at that, I can think, there is nothing there for me. I could imagine, man, what if Samuel was kind of a person that wanted something bigger? They wanted a calling. They wanted authority. They wanted a position of really big influence. Joseph gets to be the prophet. He gets to be the first elder. Can I do something with the hat and the glory rocks and all that kind of cool stuff? And sometimes God looks at us and he says, that's not what you need. That's not what you're going to have, because you don't have to be in that position of authority in order to have influence. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah. One thought too is this: it's if you think about, again, your epitaph or your funeral, it's like, who is going to attend your funeral, right? Who really cares about you or knows you enough to attend your funeral or to care once you're gone? I mean, many of us, quote unquote, influencers have blogs, have other types of things. I have a personal blog. I reach about on average 1,000 people a day. But at the end of the day, those aren't people that are going to attend my funeral. I hope to have a blip in their life for goodness at some point, but that is short-lived. I hope, obviously, I want my family and my closest friends to fill the 2 or 3 front rows, and other people might attend. But at the end of the day, those are the people, again, within that circle of influence where I feel empowered, I've made a difference.
Ooh, that's really great. In fact, that leads us up to our next slide. If you want to pull up the poem, we've got a little bit of poetry to share today. This is a poem some of you may have heard. It's called The Dash. It goes, I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke of the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time they spent alive on earth. And now only those who loved them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, or the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spent our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you would like to change? For you never know how much time is left that still can be rearranged. To be less quick to anger and to show appreciation more. And love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read, your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you lived your dash? That's attributed to a wonderful person named Linda Ellis. Your thoughts on this, Jenny?
My question is this: is it an M dash or an N dash?
I think it's an M dash.
Okay, all right.
Hashtag typographical nerd joke. Very good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Jenny, what were you going to say?
Oh no, I like it. I think that's great when you think about epitaphs and legacy. What you know, I often have thought, and I say to John, you know, like what will our legacy be? You know, we're creating our legacy, and it's more than just those dates. So I like that a lot.
You know, we've got a couple of comments here. If we could real quick. Nilda says, oh, wow, it makes me cry. I'm right there with you, sister. That's one of the things, like, it hits your heart. You're like, ooh, oh, wow, I didn't know that I needed that today. Rosalind says, I'm reminded of the role of seniors in our wards, those with the white hair. I think they have no idea of their influence, their diligence during their pain, their visits to the temple, their courage when life isn't as pretty as it once was, and what they're teaching us. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm totally there with you as well. Just this week, we had, in the middle of our finals week, our internet died. My boys were trying to take finals online and the internet went down. And I had this little moment. I felt like I had like surfaced out of the water. And I looked around and I was like, honey, is this what life was like before? When we had no internet connection? I can't watch movies because everything's streaming. Can't listen to music because everything is streaming. We had like, we sat there and we baked brownies and we looked through a gardening catalog. It was a very strange sensation. So yeah, when we see about what life used to be like for some of these older people, that's absolutely the way that it was. I know that we're getting close to time. There is another section that's very unique here, section 25. Mm-hmm. I would hope that maybe you might be able to do several discussions all about Emma Smith and the role that she had to play. I do not want to feel like she gets shortchanged at all. But setting her aside briefly, there is a particular verse in section 25 that is so unique in Mormon culture and Mormon theology. And it's this idea of using music as a way of influencing. I think that's kind of been the general theme for today, is how we can have a good effect on people around us and how we can have levels of influence regardless of our level of authority. And one of the things that we see as this same idea was brought out to Emma, as well as saying, okay, Emma, you are now going to be in a position of influence as well. And she was tasked with putting together a hymn book. Now, she didn't have to write them. All the other church congregations around her, everybody had hymns. So everybody knew the common things. And in fact, it was such a common, ordinary thing that the hymns and the tunes themselves had names. So you would say, okay, we're going to sing this poem, and I want you to sing it to the tune of blah, blah, blah. Kind of like nowadays for us, I could say, all right, everybody, we're going to sing a Valentine song to the tune of like Sweet Caroline. And everybody knows Sweet Caroline. You know, everybody would know it.
Dum, dum, dum.
Bum, bum, bum. There's this one particular verse in section 25 that's really interesting, where it says, my soul delighteth in the song of the heart. Yea, the song of the righteous is a prayer unto me, and it shall be answered with a blessing upon their heads.
That's verse 12.
So here's the idea that musical performance has some connection to spirituality. And I would like to zoom this out a little bit and broaden the focus to say not just singing, but other types of musical performance. It could be music, it could be theater, it could be art, it could be dance. And in that vein, dear readers and listeners, we are actually quite lucky that we've got a person who knows a thing or two about that. I don't know if you've noticed the tag on her Twitter or Instagram feeds, but she's a dancer. That's one of the ways that she identifies herself. What can you tell us about your background as dancing? And more specifically, how do you feel that the Song of the Righteous is considered a form of prayer? And Jamie, for you specifically, how has dance fit into that model as well?
Those are such good questions. So there is I should say, just to kind of preface this, that there's a regional theater here in Utah that I've been lucky enough to be affiliated with. And when you audition, when you go through the audition process at this theater, one of the things they ask on your audition form is, do you consider, for auditions for musicals specifically, do you consider yourself a singer who dances or a dancer who sings? And had you asked me earlier in my life, I would have said that I'm a singer who dances. But as my life has evolved, I might say it the other way around. Like you said, I do use the word dancer to identify myself in, at least partially. I love DNC section 25, verse 12. A song of the righteous is a prayer unto me, and shall be answered with a blessing on their heads. This week, we talked about how a year ago today was when we announced that we would be sharing these Come Follow Me lessons online. However, 5 years ago, this Friday, March 19th, was a very special day. It was the day of, it was the culmination of months of rehearsal for something that has been one of the most influential experiences in my life. The Provo City Center Temple, when it was, right before it was dedicated, there was a youth cultural celebration called Beauty for Ashes, which of course refers to how the Provo City Center Temple formerly was the Provo Tabernacle until it caught on fire. And they were able to maintain so much of the structure and from that create a temple. What you can see on your screen here is from the church news, and that person center stage there, that happens to be my daughter, who on Friday had her birthday and is now 17. My own experience with this is that as things were evolving in the preparation for this cultural celebration, I was given a calling or an assignment to be my ward's youth dance specialist, and ended up expanding to more than one ward, because another ward, the dance specialist was very pregnant and not really in a physical state to be able to dance. So we combined efforts, and what you see right here is just one picture from a rehearsal that we had one night. The musical number that we performed, there were many musical numbers performed throughout the night, and the one that I was affiliated with was the last one of the night. And you can see here, this was at the Marriott Center. It's all young women. They're all wearing white dresses, and we've had experience here with we've had experience on this Come Follow Me with being cut off from music. So I don't want to play a video clip. We don't want to get cut out here. But what was really special for me about that experience was not only that I was called to do that, but also that at the time, my three oldest daughters were able to participate as well, because on the day of the performance, the youngest one had just turned 12, and the other two were in there as well. So it was very unique, very special, and you can see these pictures here on the screen that John is showing, that from the performance, and a lot of those, like I said, they were used in the church news, etc. But what was very special for me about that experience is that I really felt like God knew me at that time, because dance is something that a lot of people see as maybe frivolous, or, I mean, it is, I guess you might call a hobby or an extracurricular. It's a form of exercise, but I absolutely know that that it is too a form of worship used in the right way. And that's not even counting the fact that BYU and other church schools have a very strong presence in the world of dance performance as they tour the world. The Cougarettes are world champions, and for good reason. They're very talented. They're very sharp. And still there are dance performances that really that really testify. You know, there's a line. Oh gosh, Ben, why'd you ask me to do this? There's a line in a hymn that you know, that says, Jesus, listening, can hear the songs I cannot sing. And I know that I've been blessed with an able body, that is I come from a place of privilege that way, because not everyone has that. And I know that there have been times when I felt like I couldn't sing, but I could move in a way that, or at least teach others to move in a way that were ways to honor Jesus Christ, and in this case, his home. It was one of the best experiences of my life, hands down.
I mean, thank you so much for sharing. I love the light in your daughter's eyes and the faces in those photographs. I mean, that, and what, like, to copy the movie Inside Out. I mean, this is like bing, core memory for them, right? And obviously for you. And I love the line that you said that, you know, there sometimes I can't say it, sometimes I can't sing it, but I can move. You know, maybe there's something about this whole idea of being a divine creation and coming down and having a physical body and learning how to express ourselves through that physical body. And sometimes there are no words, literally, that can do it. Sometimes there is nothing else besides this thing that we are in. And if we can use and learn how to use this thing to say what our soul is trying to say, then maybe we'll get closer to God because of it. I love this comment that Kalani says about how Emma Smith is an elect lady, and songs of the heart are a form of prayer. We just had our virtual reunion on my mother's side this weekend, and they are blessed with musical talents. Music connects us through the internet from Utah, Texas, Sydney, Australia, Auckland, New Zealand. Our love is sung through music, and we can feel our ancestors joining us through the voices. This is new to us, but it sure does capture our children and grandchildren, the power of love through music. And Modesto also says, I was a juror on a gang murder trial of two brothers, and I sang the Spirit of God daily, and it gave me peace. Tony, then can I continue with this, Jenny? Is that okay?
Please.
Tony says, Jenny, your description of dance reminds me of Christ as the Lord of the dance. Dance there. Were you ever, maybe I am the Lord of the dance.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's a song.
I was going to say,
you know,
what scripture reference is that? I was thinking to myself, did I miss that one?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Dance then wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he. Yes.
There we go. There we go. You guys are the absolute experts here. I think this is a beautiful thing, because, you know, this entire past year that we've been through, more than anything else, it's shown us that life can really be hard, and it can be harder when we're alone. Sometimes it feels like we can be surrounded by other humans, we can be interacting with them, but we still feel alone. And I think this whole quarantine has brought into painful relief the need that we have for connection and for meaning. We want to feel like the things that we do actually mean something to somebody. And these interconnected threads of humanity that normally are a beautiful, gorgeous tapestry of the world around us seem to have been worn a bit thin. And these cloths of familial and allies and friendships have become a bit threadbare. But it doesn't have to be. We don't have to fix everything all at once. We don't have to fix everything. We just need to start where we are and do what we can with what we have, through whatever voice or whatever body we have to use to express that. So yeah, there may be darkness around us, but that darkness doesn't have to be inside us. And if we can take whatever candle-sized light we have and spread it, like I keep telling my kids, or I tell the youth that when I speak at firesides, all you really need to worry about is keep being awesome and go out and light the dark. Do what you can and bring that light to everybody else around us. And we're going to be okay.
Absolutely. I love that. That's keep being awesome. You know, that is Ben. That I mean, it really, and it light the dark. I mean, that is a huge part of your legacy as far as I can see. So thank you so much. And thanks to everyone. Are we out of time now?
I think so.
Okay, great. So thanks again to everyone for your kind comments. I'm so appreciative of this deeper dive. Next week, Sunday, March 21st, the lesson is called All Things Must Be Done in Order. And that covers Doctrine and Covenants, sections 27 and 28. So just 2 sections. And we will go over that again. We'll have our broadcast around 9 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, because it's daylight saving now. And all the times in between. We usually go live between 9 and 9:20. So thank you for your patience with that. Thanks everyone so much. Thank you to Ben, of course, for all your preparation, your deep thoughts, and your wonderful questions. Thank you to John for your hard work behind the scenes. Thanks to everyone participating in this lesson for being patient with our with our technical brownouts and everything else. And thank you for your contributions, whether in word or in spirit. And we hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you again next week. Take care. Thank you.